Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving deep into some of the biggest headlines, and we're going to break them down using a GS2 expert lens, looking at everything through the framework of India's constitution, governance, and international relations. Okay, so here's our game plan. For every big story we look at, we're going to first lay down its foundation, what we call the static part. That could be a constitutional article, a foreign policy doctrine, or a core government policy. Once we've got that anchor, we'll dive into the dynamic part, the news itself. It's the best way to really get what's going on. First up, we're heading to the global stage. There's a high-stakes diplomatic standoff playing out between the United States and Iran, and we need to figure out what it all means for India. So, first things first, let's talk about the core idea guiding India's foreign policy, strategic autonomy. Now, this isn't about being isolated, not at all. It's about having the freedom to act on our own national interest, without being tied down by any single country or alliance. It's how India can be friends with both the US and Russia at the same time. That's strategic autonomy in a nutshell. Okay, with that doctrine in mind, let's look at what's happening right now, because things are really heating up. Iran is saying no to new talks because of US blockades. The US is talking tough, threatening airstrikes and sending envoys to the region. And meanwhile, you've got the European allies on the sidelines, and they're really worried that this is all going to lead to some quick, flimsy deal that ignores the real issues, especially when Iran is still sitting on a powerful missile and drone arsenal. And this is where it gets really tricky for India. This whole geopolitical chess game puts us in a tough spot. On one hand, we've got our really important partnership with the United States. But on the other hand, we have absolutely vital interests in Iran, like the Chabahar port and the huge INSTC trade corridor. These projects are crucial for our connection to Central Asia and beyond. So what do you do? And hey, for those of you prepping for exams, this whole topic is a gold mine for tricky questions. You know the kind I'm talking about, right? Here's a classic one for you. Where is the IAEA, the UN's main nuclear watchdog, actually headquartered? It's so easy to fall for that trap, isn't it? So many of those big international bodies are in Geneva, so that's the gut answer for a lot of people. But nope, the correct answer is Vienna, Austria. It's one of those little details that can make all the difference. Oh, and another thing to remember, the original nuclear deal, the JCPOA, was with the P5+1. That's the 5 permanent Security Council members plus Germany. It wasn't with the EU as a single bloc. All right, let's zoom in a bit. From the big global picture right down to our own backyard, we're going to see how these same kinds of principles play out, but in a totally different context, by looking at India's relationship with Sri Lanka. So the guiding principle here is something called the neighborhood first policy. And it's pretty much what it sounds like. It's this core belief that a peaceful and prosperous South Asia is absolutely essential for India's own growth and security. So we prioritize those relationships. And we're seeing this policy in action right now with a really significant move. India has just extended eligibility for the Overseas Citizen of India card, the OCI card, all the way to the 6th generation of the Indian origin Tamil community in Sri Lanka. That is a truly powerful gesture of connection. But you gotta look at the bigger picture here, because that's where it gets really fascinating. This isn't just happening out of the blue. Remember, it comes right after India pumped in over $4 billion of aid to help Sri Lanka through its recent economic crisis. And it's all happening against the backdrop of rising concern over China's influence in the region, things like the infamous Hambantota port deal. So this move is about culture, but it's also deeply strategic. Okay, from foreign policy, we're now turning inward to look at a couple of huge domestic debates. And these are debates that really get to the heart of India's representative democracy itself. Let's kick things off with the constitutional anchor, the bedrock for this whole discussion, Article 82. What this article does is it basically requires Parliament to redraw our country's electoral maps after every census. The goal is to make sure that, in theory, every person's vote carries the same weight. This whole process is called delimitation. And this table just lays out the central conflict perfectly. The next time we do this, which is due after 2026, it's setting up a massive north-south divide. The northern states are arguing, look, it's about one person, one vote. We have more people, so we should have more seats. But the southern states are saying, hey, wait a minute. You're basically penalizing us for doing a good job with population control and development. They feel their political voice is going to be seriously diminished and that it weakens the entire federal structure of the country. And this quote from Shashi Tharoor really captures that sense of urgency. He's making the point that you can't just apply some mathematical formula here. If you do this without a major national conversation, you could spark a really serious crisis in our federal system. Now for our second big debate on representation. The starting point, the static constitutional reality, is this. Thanks to the historic 73rd and 74th Amendments, we have a guaranteed 33% reservation for women in local government, in panchayats and cities. But, and this is the crucial part, there's nothing like that for parliament. And here's the dynamic part of the story, and it's a huge setback. The recent bill, the one that was supposed to finally bring that 33% reservation to the Lok Sabha and state assemblies, well, it's been defeated. 33%. Just think about that number for a second. That was the target, the number that was supposed to fundamentally change what our highest lawmaking bodies look like. But where are we actually? This is the stark reality. We're sitting at roughly 13.6%. That's the percentage of women in the Lok Sabha today, and it's well below the global average. It just shows you how big the gap is between the aspiration and the reality. All right, for our final topic, we're shifting gears to governance in action. We're looking at a major policy change in education that's going to directly affect millions of kids and thousands of schools across the country. So the policy behind all this, the static foundation, is something we've had for a long, long time. The three-language formula. It's been a cornerstone of our education policy since the 60s. The idea is to promote multilingualism by having students learn three languages, usually their mother tongue, English, and another modern Indian language. But now, things are changing. The latest curriculum framework has laid down a new rule for CBSE schools. For kids in classes 6 to 8, that third language choice must be a language native to India. What this means, in plain English, is that foreign languages like French or German, which were really popular options in a lot of schools, are effectively being pushed out. And as you can imagine, this has schools that have invested a ton in those programs really concerned. And all of this brings us right back to a really fundamental question. The same one that came up with the delimitation debate, right? What is democracy really? Is it just about the majority getting its way? Or is it something more? Something about ensuring everyone gets a fair shot, that everyone is represented, and that the interests of all groups are protected? And that leaves us with this final critical thought for the future. As India faces these huge demographic and political changes, what's going to happen to its federal compact? I mean, that's the very agreement that holds our incredibly diverse union of states together. How is it going to adapt? There are definitely no easy answers here, but one thing is for sure. The debates we've talked about today aren't just for the classroom. They are going to define the future of India's democracy for generations to come.
I love this quote because it just gets right to the point. The news, it's all reaction, it's what's happening right now. But strategy, that's the long game. It's the blueprint, the deep undercurrents that are quietly guiding where everything is headed.
So that's the big question we're tackling. How can we look at a headline today and see the strategy for tomorrow playing out? We're going to take three major stories from India's economy and tech world and decode the strategic play behind every single one. You ready? Let's dive in.
Okay, first up, a story about some seriously big money and corporate responsibility. You know, we hear all the time about companies donating to charities and social causes, but what most people don't realize is there's a very specific and very powerful rulebook behind it all.
Just look at that number, over 22,000 crore rupees. That's more than $2.5 billion US dollars. It's what Indian companies spent last year on what we call corporate social responsibility, or CSR. And get this, that's a 23% jump from the year before. So on the surface, it just looks like a massive wave of corporate generosity, right?
Well, a strategist always asks what's next. Is this just companies deciding to be nice, or is there something else at play? Is there a mandate forcing their hand? This is where we stop looking at the headline and start looking for the blueprint.
And here it is, Section 135 of the Companies Act. This is not a suggestion, folks. It's the law. The rule kicks in if a company hits any one of these targets: a net worth over 500 crore, turnover of 1,000 crore, or a net profit of 5 crore. If you hit that mark, you must spend 2% of your average net profit on CSR. No ifs, ands, or buts.
And this is where the strategist gets their edge, in the details that most people just skim over. For example, that 2% isn't based on this year's profit, it's the average of the last 3 years. And you can't just write a check. A dedicated board committee has to manage this whole thing. And here's the real kicker. If you don't spend the money, you can't just keep it. It has to go into a special government account. So the big takeaway here? This isn't just about charity. It's a tightly regulated piece of corporate governance.
All right, next, We're shifting gears from the boardroom to the absolute core of India's energy strategy, nuclear power. A huge breakthrough just happened that has, literally, been decades in the making.
So just the other day, India joined this super exclusive club. It became only the 6th country on the entire planet to operate a commercial fast breeder reactor. I mean, this is a massive deal, a huge leap in science and engineering.
But you gotta ask, right? What in the world is a fast breeder reactor? And more importantly, why is this one piece of tech so critical to a national dream, a plan that was laid out by the visionary Dr. Homi Bhabha over half a century ago?
This is the scientific blueprint. It's absolutely brilliant. See, India doesn't have a lot of uranium, but it has one of the world's biggest stockpiles of another element, thorium. The problem? You can't just put thorium in a reactor. So, Bhabha came up with this genius 3-stage plan. Stage 1, use the uranium we do have to create plutonium. Now, Stage 2, which we just entered with that new reactor, uses that plutonium to make power and, this is the magic part, it converts our useless thorium into a brand new nuclear fuel, uranium-233. And that leads to Stage 3, using that U-233 to power the country, unlocking our massive thorium reserves for like centuries of clean energy. Just incredible.
And again, the details are everything. Why is it called a breeder? Because it literally creates more fuel than it uses up. Think about that for a second. The engineering is also insane. It uses liquid sodium as a coolant, not water. And finally, check out the governance. The Department of Atomic Energy doesn't report to some minister. It reports directly to the Prime Minister's office. That tells you just how high stakes, how nationally critical this entire program really is.
Okay, for our last topic, we're looking at the brain inside all of our modern gadgets, the semiconductor. Every country on Earth wants to dominate this industry, but India is playing a very different, very calculated, long game.
You have to hear this fact. It's mind-blowing. India is home to over 20% of the world's semiconductor design talent. Let that sink in. 1/5 of the people designing the world's most advanced chips for all the big global companies are right here in India.
So that leads to the big strategic puzzle, doesn't it? If we have the brains designing the chips, why don't we have the factories making them? Why do we still have to import almost every single chip we use? The answer is fascinating, and it all comes down to a very deliberate choice. You have to understand there are 2 different games you can play here. Building a fab, a fabrication plant where chips are actually made, is astronomically expensive. We're talking $10 billion plus, and it's a super high-risk game that only a few countries have mastered. So India's strategy is to not play that game directly. Instead, it's playing a smarter one. We double down on our strength, design, and then we focus on the next step in the chain, ATMP. That's assembly, testing, marking, and packaging. It's a much more patient, much more realistic path to building an ecosystem from the ground up.
But let's be real about the challenges. Government schemes are a huge help, but they only cover up to 50% of the cost, not the whole thing. And here's a major vulnerability. Our amazing designers? They all depend on highly specialized software tools that are owned by American companies. That creates a tricky geopolitical dependency. So, seeing companies like Tata and Micron making huge investments in Gujarat is a massive first step, but the strategy is patience. Solidify our leadership in design today, build out our muscle in packaging tomorrow, and then maybe, just maybe, go for full-on fabrication way down the road. So there you have it. You see, beneath the surface of the daily news, you've got these deep strategic plays unfolding. A law that's quietly directing billions in corporate finance, a 50-year-old nuclear dream that's finally becoming reality, and a patient, calculated bet on the future of technology. Are they foolproof blueprints, or are they high-stakes gambles? Well, that's the question a strategist never stops asking.
You know, we're all flooded with news every single day, and it's so easy to just get lost in all that noise. But what if we started looking at those headlines a little differently? Not just as events, but as really complex ethical problems. In this explainer, that's exactly what we're going to do. Okay, so take this story about protests in Noida. Now, on the surface, it looks like a straightforward economic dispute. But once you dig just a little deeper, you find this really fundamental ethical question. What is the true value of a person's labor, and who actually gets to decide that? And then, on the flip side, you get a story about incredible progress. We're talking about AI helping doctors diagnose diseases way earlier, more accurately. It feels like a clear win, right? But even here, just beneath the surface, there are these profound ethical challenges around things like privacy, bias, and even access to care. And you know, even something that sounds super technical, like redrawing electoral boundaries. That touches on the absolute core of our democratic principles. How do you balance one person, one vote with being fair to states that have grown and developed at completely different speeds? It taps right into that big North-South debate happening in India. So the big question is, how do we cut through all that noise? How do we find the ethical signal that helps us really understand what's at stake here? Well, that's what this is all about. We're going to build a kind of toolkit to help analyze the human dilemmas sitting right at the heart of the news. All right, so let's start with that story out of Noida. It's not just a headline about unrest. It's a story about what it actually costs to live and who ultimately pays that price. This is where we stop talking in abstracts and get very, very real. Okay, for a second, let's just forget all the percentages and the big economic theories. This one number, it really says it all. 90 rupees a day. For some factory workers in Noida, that is the reality. And it forces us to ask a really simple human question. Can anyone truly live a life of dignity on that amount? And look, this isn't happening in a vacuum, right? It's not just about the wages being low. It's about the staggering difference. A factory worker might earn around 1.76 lakh rupees a year. Meanwhile, supervisory staff are earning over 14 lakh. That's an eightfold gap. And suddenly, the whole debate shifts to how value is being distributed inside the system. And you see, this isn't just about economics. It's actually a constitutional issue. Article 43 of the Indian Constitution, it sets a moral goal for the whole country, a living wage, to ensure a decent standard of life. And that's not just a nice suggestion, it's meant to be a guiding light for how the country is run. And right there, that's the absolute core of the ethical dilemma we're talking about. When you have this massive canyon between the constitutional dream of a living wage and the reality of a 90 rupee a day existence, well, it stops being just about money. It becomes a question of governance, of constitutional morality, and the fundamental dignity of labor itself. Okay, so we've got these really complex, constantly changing problems popping up in the headlines. To make sense of them, we need some solid, timeless tools. You can think of them like different lenses that you can use to examine pretty much any ethical issue. So, first up is constitutional morality. This is basically our foundational compass. It's this big idea that the Constitution is more than just a rule book. It's a moral document. It tells us the kind of society we're trying to build, one where core values like dignity, liberty, and justice guide everything we do. All right, next up in our toolkit is utilitarianism. This is the big picture framework. It asks one simple question: which action will lead to the best overall outcome for the most people? It's all about consequences. If a policy helps millions, even if it hurts a few, a utilitarian might say it's the right move. It's all about maximizing overall happiness. But to balance that out, we have what's called rights-based ethics. This framework says, hold on, consequences aren't everything. Some things are just plain right or wrong, period. It argues that people have certain fundamental rights and we have duties to uphold them no matter what the outcome might be for the majority. Okay, so we've built our toolkit. Now let's put it to the test with a totally different kind of story: AI in healthcare. It's a perfect example of how amazing progress can create brand new ethical puzzles for us to solve. I mean, the promise here is just staggering. A big trial in Sweden found that using AI to help screen mammograms detected 29% more cancers. And listen, that isn't just a number. That represents thousands of real people, lives that could be saved because something was caught earlier. The upside is absolutely immense. But, and this is a huge but, with all that incredible promise comes some serious peril. What happens if the AI is biased because it was trained on data from one group of people and doesn't work so well for another? Are patients actually giving clear consent for their data to be used like this? Is this amazing tech only going to be for the wealthy? And maybe the biggest question, when the algorithm gets it wrong, who's responsible? These aren't technical problems, they're deeply human ethical ones. So we've looked at this very human, on-the-ground problem of wages and this really futuristic problem of AI. Now, let's bring our frameworks back in and see how they can help us move from just, pointing out problems to actually thinking about real policy solutions. Okay, let's apply those lenses to the AI dilemma. A utilitarian would look at that 29% number and say, wow, think of the lives we can save. The greatest good is to push forward with AI, and we'll manage the risks as we go. But someone using a rights-based lens, one grounded in our Constitution's right to privacy, would say, whoa, not so fast. An individual's right to control their private health data is a fundamental right. It can't just be sacrificed for the greater good without their clear, informed consent. You can see how they point in totally different directions, right? And really, this is the ultimate takeaway here. It doesn't matter if you're talking about a factory floor in Noida or a high-tech lab. The fundamental challenge for good governance is exactly the same. You absolutely need a strong ethical compass to navigate the tension between progress and principles, between what's good for the many and what's right for the individual. So in the end, this final question, it isn't just for the people making policy. It's really for all of us. In a world that is changing so incredibly fast, which timeless principles are we going to choose to guide our decisions? How do we make sure that the future we're building isn't just technologically advanced, but also ethically sound? Okay, so here's our game plan. First up, we're mastering the mains blueprint. Then we're going to spot some prelims traps, and we'll finish up with a final fact marathon. Let's do this. All right, part 1, mastering the mains blueprint. Let's get straight to the heart of it, the mains answer. This isn't just about dumping everything you know onto the page. No, it's all about how you structure your analysis to get those maximum marks. This is where the real strategy kicks in. So we're going to use a real, high-priority GS3 question as our case study today. It's about India's nuclear program. And this one is perfect because it forces you to blend those hard, static facts with your own critical analysis. That combo, that's exactly what the examiner is looking for. Look, a really powerful answer always follows a clear, logical structure. Think of it like a roadmap. You start with the big vision in your intro. Then, the body is where you get into the nitty-gritty, the significance, and the challenges. And you always finish with the strong, forward-looking conclusion. This roadmap makes it super easy for the examiner to follow your logic and, you guessed it, give you the marks you deserve. Okay, and here is the absolute golden rule. Your dynamic analysis, your critical thinking, it has to be anchored by static facts. Seriously, opinions on their own get you nowhere. You need to explicitly connect your big arguments, like, say, calling this a geopolitical signal, to a hard fact, like the specific fissile materials the PFBR produces. See? One supports the other. It's a foundation. Okay, time to switch gears. Let's talk prelims, where every single second counts. This is going to be a rapid-fire reflex drill. I'll throw a common trap at you, and we'll break down exactly how to spot it in an instant. Ready? Let's go. First up, the trap is that a fast breeder reactor produces less fissile material than it consumes. But the truth? The name itself is the biggest clue. It's a breeder reactor. It breeds fuel, so it actually produces more. Any question that flips that is just a fundamental misunderstanding. So simple, but so easy to fall for. Don't do it. All right, trap number 2. The PFBR uses heavy water as a coolant. Wrong. This is such a classic error because yes, India's stage 1 reactors use heavy water, but the stage 2 PFBR, that uses liquid sodium, which is super reactive with water. They are absolutely not interchangeable, and knowing that difference is critical. Here's another one they love to throw at you, administrative structures. The trap is thinking the Department of Atomic Energy reports to the Ministry of Science and Technology. Nope. The DAE is so high security, so strategically important, it reports directly to the Prime Minister of India. That's a unique setup, and you can bet examiners love to test you on it. And for our final trap in this round, it's all about dates. The trap? The US withdrew from the Iran nuclear deal in 2015. But wait. In international relations, timing is everything. The deal was signed in 2015. The US withdrawal? That was a completely different event under a different president in 2018. Mixing those up is such an easy way to lose marks. You gotta lock in those key dates. Okay, on to our final section. This is the fact marathon. Think of it as a high-speed drill designed for pure memory reinforcement. We are gonna burn these key points right into your brain, fast and focused. You ready? Let's go. PFBR basics. Location, Kopakam, Tamil Nadu. Operator, BHAVINI. The coolant, and this is a critical detail, liquid sodium. Got it? Lock it in. Next set. Wider context. India's thorium rank. Third largest in the world. The 3-stage nuclear plan sequence. Stage 1 is PHWR, Stage 2 is FBR, Stage 3 is AHWR. And let's throw in a key polity fact. The 42nd Amendment in 1976, what did it do? Froze Lok Sabha seats. Next. Last set. Let's cement these for good. Who does the DAE report to? The Prime Minister. Article 43, what is it? A DPSP, which means critically not enforceable in court. And that JCPOA withdrawal date one more time? 2018. Boom. Done. So there you have it. That's the toolkit. You've got the blueprint for the mains, you've sharpened your reflexes for the prelims, and you've got those core facts ready for instant recall. We've laid out the strategy, but now it's your turn to practice, to perfect, and to perform. So go out there and master it.
If you're ready to really practice all 8 mains questions from today's news, and you want to get your hands on prelims MCQs and detailed notes, go ahead and download the complete PDF. Just scan the QR code on your screen or use the link in the description to join our Telegram channel. Keep up the amazing work, stay consistent, and I will see you in the next explainer.